can't tell you how happy this watch makes me. I've had it for 10 years now, or 10 years next month, so 9 years and 11 months, and still it brings so much joy to me. That's not to say that throughout these past 10 years I wouldn't say fallen out of love with it, because love is a very deep, sort of permanent feeling. But I've fallen out of brief enchantment with it. I've certainly, the spell that this watch once, had over me and has over me again, had, waned a bit at times. And truly, not intentionally, it just really seems that after 10 years, this watch is again calling my name. Why? Well, it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's a 1977 1601 Datejust with a beautiful pipe hand blue dial and a silver date window that I absolutely adore. The condition's good. It's not perfect, but it's good. It's clean. I've taken very good care of it over the last 10 years. I just added a Jubilee bracelet to this watch for the first time in my life. I never wore it like that. And I'm wearing it a little bit loose, which I kind of like the feeling of, and I don't usually do. But that's not why I'm back deeply in love with this watch. Actually, the only watch that I've worn for the past 2 weeks, basically, maybe putting on a watch here or there, or take a picture or something like that. But it is the only watch that I have reached for in the last 2 weeks. And I know that that's not totally monumental. People wear the same watch their entire lives, and I'm not, I shouldn't grandstand too much about, wearing a Rolex for 2 weeks. I know that can sound ridiculous, but in a much more real way, right? With context, with perspective, I've got a lot of really cool watches in my collection, right? I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been collecting things that I love, right? From Cartier and from Piaget, and I have this incredible, complicated Joel Charles that I adore and can't wait to put back on again. And I've got other Rolexes that are rarer and more beautiful. But this is the only watch that I've worn in 2 weeks. And it's not intentional. It would be more almost believable if this were just contrived, right? If I were just, to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, I'm wearing my watch again for the first time. I swear it's not that at all. I swear. For whatever reason, something is, going on in my life, I think, in the way that I'm looking at things, and the way that I'm feeling about things, and in respect to work and friendships, and in respect to my future, and whatever that may mean, that I'm finding great comfort, almost like, that, like a blanket, right? I didn't have the blanket. I had a little, bunny rabbit that I used to call Runny Barrett that I would carry around with me. But it's the same thing. Oh, Runny Barrett was this color blue too. Oh, that's weird. But it's kind of funny. But I find it very comforting. I find that this watch is really reflective of kind of where I really would love to be. And I don't mean like with business. I don't mean like financially, where I want to be aspirationally. No, like this watch represents contentment, right? This watch is like, wearing it again is kind of, the word satiated comes to mind, right? I mean, that's a really healthy thing. It's really healthy to like not always like an addict to be itching for the next thing. And I know that we make cute allusions to addiction all the time, and I have no problem with that, right? I'm not just standing on this hill and drawing a line that we can't talk about, can't liken watch loving to addiction, because they are similar, right? I mean, this idea of kind of the never-ending, accumulation of things that we don't need, right? This redundancy is totally predicated upon our lack of will to control ourselves, right? I mean, it's totally predicated upon a lack of self-control, right? Because we know we don't need this. This is ridiculous, right? And for the small percentage of people that, truly have so much money that their watch purchases really have no impact on anything, then God bless you, sure. It's still good to, have less sometimes, right? It's still good to put on a little old Swatch, or your, first little Rolex, or your PRX, or whatever it may be that brings you joy, that did once bring you joy, and because it is good. You liked it the first time for the right reasons, and it was simple. And then everything got complicated, just like life, right? But then I guess it's kind of reminding me now of like that front porch thing from How I Met Your Mother, right? Like that's kind of reminds me of, right? Life gets really, really complicated, but at the end, you kind of just want to sit in your backyard or on your front porch and kind of like just be with your friends and family and kind of just like watch what's going on and kind of hang out. And I'm 28. I'm not terminally ill. That's kind of what it sounds like. It's it. I've reached divine clarity and it's all no, it's ridiculous. God, I struggle with a million things every single day. No, God. But I do seem to have my watch habit under control, or my relationship with watches right now does seem kind of good. Other things, maybe not. The watch is good, and that's great. I love this watch. And to be honest, I think for a long time I was like a little bit embarrassed that I wasn't wearing it. Like there was definitely a part of me that was like, oh God, you're so shitty, man. Like that watch was everything to you at one point. That watch was your whole world. I mean, I remember I went to Seton Hall University in Essex County, New Jersey. I usually say Bergen County because I forget and someone always reminds me. I call it the Princeton of Bergen County, even though it's in Essex, which actually adds a layer to the joke. But I digress. I remember sitting in class, and I was a Catholic Studies major. I remember sitting in these classes that I was totally out of my depth in. I remember listening, but I also remember having Hodinkee up on my computer, for sure. I remember reading Ben's early articles and watching Talking Watches, or like looking at the photos or watching them on mute or whatever the hell I was doing. I remember looking at my blue Datejust, the one that I had just shelled out, at the time, like $3,400 for, $1,500 of which I had to borrow from my mom, and then I had to pay her back, and it was babysitting. It was a whole big story and a whole big to do. My mom is really the reason why I bought this watch. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have had the encouragement I wouldn't have pulled the trigger. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need someone else to say, hey, it's good, you deserve it, But anyway, I remember sitting in those classes and staring at this watch. Really the date window even more than the dial, which is kind of weird. Because it had this beautiful brushed finish. Still does, right? Naturally. And I remember just thinking like, I certainly didn't feel successful, which is definitely the feeling commonly associated with having a Rolex. Right? You feel like, oh, you did it. The whole idea of a Rolex is you get one when you do it, And I certainly hadn't done anything yet. But I remember kind of thinking that I had, I guess, like a promising future, maybe big shoes to fill, and like everything was gonna like be great, and I was starting this off well. It's like going into an interview with a good suit, right? It's like a navy blue suit that kind of makes you look good, and it's like I think I have a shot at this, I think I'm about to put my best foot forward. I think I'm gonna look back in a year or two, and everything's gonna be really good, and I think that now at that point when I'm wearing this suit, I will not be presenting forward. I will be that thing, right? And that's really how I felt. And I didn't buy another watch for years. I mean, really, obviously I started the Theo and Harris company, which, changed my life. But I hadn't bought another watch for myself for years. And then in the last couple of years, right, that's when I started buying watches and my GMT and this and that and all these different things. I love them all. I'm not selling anything, by the way. I love my collection, and I look forward to rekindling with those watches a little bit too in a healthy manner. But I love now, 10 years later, and I swear, not intentionally, this watch has found its way back on my wrist. I guess it's just crazy to think that two extremes were so close to each other, right? Because once I had purchased this watch and now actually felt like a member of that club and was able to examine the beauty of a vintage piece every single day, I mean, that was it. I mean, that was the beginning of the end, right? I mean, from there it was Seamasters and vintage Longines and to even be in the same room as a vintage Patek Philippe with the most delicate precious metal cases. It's like, it was a dream to me. And then even further, the fact that I could, if I was strategic and over time, I could buy these pieces because it was the business, right? Because the business blossomed from it. I could buy the pieces and I could list them. And, even if we weren't making much money, and God knows, they were selling the watches, it was horrible business, right? At the beginning, there was nothing going on. But it was I felt so lucky that I could even be in the same room, hold, sell, and not, right, be ultimately, bankrupting myself, right? I was just lucky to touch watches without being bankrupt, right? That's essentially, right? It was like, it was, the name Curator came of that, right? Curator of the Theo and Harris Watch Shop. That was a bit cheeky, but I really did feel like a very proud curator of a museum. I really felt like this is my baby, and all of the things in it that are in it because I chose them, and they're in the Theo and Harris shop because I would wear them. And it's kind of my little museum. And I know that museum is a very dramatic word, but in concept, it's true. That is what it is, and that certainly was what it was, and is what it is today. Right? Anything in that shop, anything that we touch is something that I find to different levels of depth interesting and beautiful. And of course, my personal taste, like veers on the side of old and elegant, and that's why the shop has always had, that skew. It's always skewed that way. And over the years that followed, even though I had only projected, selling, a couple watches a year, really, right? But over the years that followed, we sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of watches, vintage Rolex Datejust, most popular among them, and Cartier tanks and all these different things I never thought I'd be able to touch. And we were selling them all over the world, right? Not only building communities locally and in New York and in, bi-coastal and everything, but all over the world. I remember packaging up watches to ship to Germany when I was like 19 years old, 20 years old, and saying, I can't even believe someone in Germany is on my website. I can't even believe that someone in a little English town that I've never heard of, and when I looked it up on a map, it's in the middle of nowhere, right? Not nowhere near a major city, is like sharing in our appreciation of these beautiful vintage items. And that became another like major passion, not just the watches themselves, but the building of community and the sharing of idea and appreciation, and the fact that I could facilitate that, and I could actually be someone that would put an incredible vintage watch in your wrist. That was like, I had the coolest job for a 20-year-old. What 20-year-old had a cooler job than I did? Of course, within relative terms, but I don't think it could have been any more fulfilling. And I'm glad that 10 years later we still have that. And now that we brought it back in the metal just a month ago and you guys loved it, and I was so glad to make it. But think about that, right? 10 years later, we're still doing it, between vintage watches and straps and everything. And it all started here. It all started here, and in many ways, this episode is really a part two to the last episode, because we introduced kind of the journey of the last 10 years and how weird it's been and sort of difficult, and the ebbs and flows of my relationship with it. And now, kind of at the same time, here we are back with this guy, back with my 1977 blue Datejust. Look at the watches that you're underappreciating in your collection, particularly the ones that are simple, relatively speaking, and the ones that maybe ignited your love for this hobby. And hopefully today I could be a little bit of an encouragement in that journey for you, right? In that homecoming back to the simple pleasures of life, right? This is very much, Paul, if you're out there, like the Ratatouille moment, right? Even, mean old Anton Ego just really wants like his mom's Ratatouille, and I guess this is my Ratatouille. That's it. Get out of here.